I've always believed marriages don't fall apart in explosions. They slip, quietly, in the spaces where two people stop looking each other in the eyes. And lately, that's what life with Daniel felt like. A string of days where we lived side by side, but not together. Don't get me wrong, we weren't fighting. There were no slammed doors, no silent treatments, no sharp words thrown across the room like knives. If anything, our home had become too quiet. Like we were both afraid that saying the wrong thing would shatter something delicate neither of us knew how to fix. Daniel had always been gentle, attentive in that understated way men like him often are. He wasn't loud or expressive, but he showed his love through patience, reliability, and the way he'd squeeze my hand whenever he sensed my anxiety rising. But for the past few months, something in him had shifted. He looked drained, physically, emotionally, a kind of exhaustion that didn't come from lack of sleep, but from carrying something he didn't want anyone to see, not even me. And that scared me more than anything. Every time I asked, "Are you okay?" he'd smile too quickly. "Just work," he'd say. Or, "I'm fine, love, really." But the words never matched his eyes. He had started avoiding certain topics, anything about childhood memories, old photographs, or stories our parents told about when we were kids. If I mentioned wanting to visit his mother's grave, he would go quiet, almost panicked, before insisting he'd rather not talk about it. He wasn't cold. He wasn't cruel. He was just somewhere else. Somewhere I couldn't reach. I kept telling myself that marriages go through phases. People change. Adults carry burdens. But it was the way he looked away when I reached for his face in the morning, like he was afraid I'd see something he couldn't explain that planted a fear in me I couldn't shake. That afternoon started like any other. We were planning a simple dinner, nothing fancy. He was chopping vegetables, movement slow, almost mechanical, while I set the table. The kitchen smelled like garlic and onions and the faint lemon of the cleaning spray I'd wiped the counters with earlier. He paused suddenly, pressing his fingers to his temples. "You okay?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He nodded too quickly, as if I'd question him further. "Yeah. I left something in the car. I'll grab it real quick." "Just a minute." That's what he said. Just a minute. To step outside. Just a minute. Away from me. I watched him walk out the front door from the kitchen window. His shoulders were tense, rolled forward in a way that made him look smaller, a man shrinking under a weight I didn't understand. The silence that followed felt heavier than usual. Something about it made my chest tighten. I stood there for a moment, staring at the half-chopped carrots, feeling an unease crawl slowly up my spine. I didn't know why. Nothing had happened. Nothing had changed. And yet, my intuition whispered that everything was about to shift. That's when I heard it. A knock. Not loud, not confident, just a gentle, fragile sound, almost apologetic. Knock. Knock. For a second, I thought it might be Daniel. Maybe he forgot his keys. But the rhythm wasn't his. He always knocked twice on the frame in his own playful pattern whenever his hands were full. This knock wasn't playful. It wasn't familiar. It was the kind of knock someone makes when they're not sure they'll be welcomed, when they're afraid of the person on the other side. I wiped my hands on the kitchen towel and walked toward the door, each step slower than the last. My heartbeat picked up for reasons I couldn't explain. Something about that knock. It felt wrong. Or maybe I was just imagining things because of the tension already simmering inside me from Daniel's distance. Still, the fear didn't make sense. I gripped the doorknob, hesitated, and then opened it. Standing on my doorstep was a woman I had never seen before. Elderly, frail, her shoulders hunched as if she were trying to make herself small. Her hair, thin and gray, was tucked behind her ears, and her eyes, tired, restless, flickered upward when she saw me. She clutched a cloth-wrapped bundle against her chest. Not a purse, not a gift. Something else. Her lips trembled as she spoke my name. "Are you Daniel's wife?" It wasn't the question itself that froze me. It was the way she said it. Like she already knew the answer. Like she had been preparing herself for this moment. Like she had wanted or dreaded meeting me for a very long time. And before I could even respond, she took a shaky breath and whispered, "I need to speak with you, please, before he comes back." I didn't know it yet, but this moment, this soft, nervous knock from a stranger, was the first crack in the life I thought I understood. A crack that would open into everything I never expected to discover. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen, staring at the woman on my doorstep as if she'd stepped out of some memory I didn't have. Her presence didn't make sense. Her fear didn't make sense. Nothing about this moment matched the quiet evening I thought I was having. She clutched that cloth-wrapped bundle so tightly, her knuckles were bone white. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, uneven breaths. And her eyes carried something I recognized but couldn't name. A kind of sorrow that had lived too long inside her. You're Daniel's wife, aren't you?" she repeated, her voice trembling. I nodded slowly. "Yes. Do we know each other?" She shook her head, a quick, panicked movement that made her gray hair shift around her face. No, you don't know me, but I know who you are." My stomach tightened. There was no way she could have meant that harmlessly, not with the way she said it, not with the way her gaze clung to my face, almost pleading. "I need to come inside," she whispered urgently. "Please, before your husband returns." Before he returns. Something about those words triggered a cold shiver down my spine. They weren't casual, they weren't polite, they were desperate. I glanced instinctively toward the driveway, expecting to see Daniel walking back at any moment, but the space was empty, still, quiet, except for the faint sound of our neighbor's wind chimes. "I don't understand," I said carefully. "Who are you? Why would—" "Please," she begged again, voice cracking this time. "I wouldn't ask if it weren't important." Her hands were trembling so violently now the cloth bundle ruffled against her coat. For a second, I wondered if I should call someone, a relative of hers, the police, anyone, but something in her expression stopped me. There was no aggression in her, no manipulation, only urgency and grief, the kind of grief you don't fake. I stepped aside, slowly, cautiously, and motioned for her to enter. She let out a thin, shaky breath like she'd been holding it the whole time and slipped past me. The moment she crossed the threshold, she sagged slightly, as if the act of stepping into my home took the last bit of strength she had left. I shut the door. She stood there in the entryway, clutching the bundle to her chest as her eyes darted around, not with curiosity, but fear, as if she expected Daniel to appear out of thin air and catch her here. I gestured toward the living room. "Please, sit." She hesitated before moving toward the couch, and I realized she wasn't just physically fragile, she was scared of resting, scared of stopping. Like the moment she sat down, everything she'd been holding back might collapse. She lowered herself slowly, carefully, and perched on the cushion as if she didn't want to leave any trace of her presence behind. I sat across from her, heart thumping hard against my ribs. "Can you tell me what this is about?" I asked quietly. Her fingers tightened around the bundle again. "It's about your husband," she said softly, "and something he should have told you long ago." My pulse spiked. "Is he hurt? Sick? In trouble?" Her eyes softened with something that almost looked like pity. "No, not in the way you're thinking." She looked at me the way someone looks at a person standing at the edge of a cliff, aware of the fall they're about to take. "Before I explain," she whispered, "I need you to hold this." She lifted the bundle with trembling hands and extended it toward me. I reached for it cautiously. The fabric was worn, thin, almost threadbare. When she released it into my hands, the weight surprised me. It was heavy, too heavy for something wrapped in simple cloth. I unfolded the edges carefully, and my breath caught in my throat. Inside was an envelope, thick, overstuffed, edges bulging slightly despite being sealed. A stack of money. Not small bills, not loose changes, but thick bundles of cash. My fingers tightened around the envelope involuntarily. "I don't understand," I whispered. "What is this?" The old woman swallowed hard, tears pushing at the corners of her eyes. "That's what your husband has been giving me," she said, "month after month, year after year." My blood ran cold. If this were about charity, he would have told me. If this were about debt, I would have known. If this were anything normal, she wouldn't be shaking like this. She reached out and placed a trembling hand over mine, over the envelope. "It was never meant for me," she said with a voice that broke on every syllable. "It was yours. It always was." I stared at her, unable to find words. She took a shaky breath and added, almost in a whisper, "And before he comes back, you need to know why he's been giving it to me." Her voice cracked. "Because he believes he owes me the life he stole." Those words sliced through the room like cold wind. Because she wasn't talking like a stranger. She wasn't talking like a scammer. She wasn't talking like someone inventing drama. She spoke like someone who had lived with this truth for years. And suddenly I understood something terrifying. This woman didn't come to ask for money, she came to return it, and to reveal a secret Daniel had been carrying long before I met him. A secret that was about to break open the life I thought I understood. I stared at the envelope sitting in my lap, its weight pressing down on me like a stone. It felt wrong in my hands. Wrong that it existed, wrong that it was in my house, wrong that a stranger had brought it to me with tears trembling in her eyes. The old woman wiped her cheeks with shaking fingers. "That money," she whispered, voice trembling with guilt she didn't deserve, "was never mine to take. It was always meant for you." My throat tightened. "Me? Why would my husband give you money? Secretly? For years?" She closed her eyes as if the question hurt. "Because he believed he owed me something far larger than money." Her words curled in the air like smoke, suffocating, impossible to grasp fully. "What could he possibly owe you? We've never met. I've never even heard your name." She flinched, not dramatically, but with the painful subtlety of someone pierced by a truth they've tried to ignore for too long. He didn't tell you about me." It wasn't even a question. It was resignation. "No," I replied, and the word felt like a crack of thunder between us. She pressed her thin hands together, her knuckles trembling as if holding back a dam that had been cracking for decades. "I used to call him Danny," she murmured, her voice soft with memories I didn't share. "He hated that name as he got older, but to me, he was always my little Danny." Danny? No one, absolutely no one called him that. Not his friends, not coworkers, not even his adoptive parents from the stories he told me. He'd mentioned once, briefly, that the only person who ever called him Danny had been his birth mother, someone he claimed had left his life before he was old enough to remember her face. My fingers tightened around the envelope. "Why are you calling him that?" She looked up, and for the first time since she arrived, her gaze met mine directly. It wasn't just sorrow there. It was something deeper, a truth buried under years of silence. Because that's who he was, before he became Daniel. She swallowed. Before the life he grew up with, the life he thinks was stolen. The room seemed to breathe around us, stretching, creaking, shrinking all at once. My voice was barely a whisper. "Who are you?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she pressed her thin hands together, her knuckles trembling as if holding back a dam that had been cracking for decades. "I'm someone," she said quietly, "who lost more than one life the day your husband was born." A chill slipped down my spine. "I don't understand. Please, explain." She shook her head sharply, her breath hitching. "I shouldn't be the one telling you this. He should have. But he won't. He refuses to." Her voice cracked again. "And every month, he sends me more money, thinking he's repaying a debt." "What debt?" I demanded, my voice rising with emotion I couldn't decide was fear or anger or both. "What does he owe you? Why give you money instead of talking to me?" I didn't even realize I was leaning forward until I saw her shrink back slightly. Not because of me, but because of the weight of the story she carried. "Because he believes he stole a life," she whispered. Her breath trembled. "And he thinks he owes me one." Her words shattered something inside me. For a moment I sat frozen, trying to process each syllable, trying to make sense of something that felt impossibly heavy. Stole a life? Owed her a life? What did that even mean? My pulse throbbed behind my ears, loud enough to drown out the ticking of the kitchen clock. "You need to make him stop sending it," she said suddenly, her voice rising in desperation as she pushed the envelope back toward me with shaking hands. "Please, I can't take it anymore. I can't watch him destroy himself trying to pay me for something he never took." Her shoulders shook as she cried. Not polite, restrained tears, but years of buried ache erupting all at once. "I never asked for this," she sobbed. "I never asked him for anything. But he keeps telling himself he has to give me everything he has. And he's killing himself with that belief." I swallowed hard, my throat raw. Why? Why would he think that? What could make him believe he owes you his entire life? Her gaze locked on mine, and in it I saw a truth so old, so painful, that it felt like it had been living inside her forever. "Because the life he grew up with," she said through trembling lips, "was supposed to be my son's." I felt the air punch out of my body. She covered her face with her hands. "He thinks he took my child's place.
He thinks every moment of happiness he lived was borrowed from a life that wasn't meant to be his. My heartbeat slowed and then surged, pounding with disbelief, confusion, dread. Daniel? My Daniel? Carrying that kind of guilt? No, that can't be true. He would have told me. He didn't, she cut in softly, because he's convinced you'd leave him if you knew. My breath hitched. She reached for my hands, gripping them with surprising strength. Please, she begged, her voice breaking completely. Help him. Make him stop believing he owes me anything. Make him stop giving me his life piece by piece. You're the only one he listens to, even if he doesn't believe he deserves you. Shock. Then confusion. Then a slow rising anger. Not at her, at him. At the man I loved, the man who had kept a secret so massive, so devastating, that it had been quietly poisoning our marriage from the inside out. How long has he been paying you? I asked, my voice shaking. She took a breath that sounded like a confession. Since the day he found out the truth, that he was switched at birth. Since the moment he realized I was supposed to be his mother. My fingers went numb. And in that moment, holding the envelope, staring at this broken woman, I realized something terrifying. The man I married wasn't pulling away from me. He was drowning in guilt, in silence, in a past that wasn't even his fault. And he had been drowning alone. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until the old woman's next words forced it out of me. My name, my real name, to him is not Mrs. Rahman, she whispered. It's the woman he has been avoiding his entire life. I'm his mother, his real one. For a second, my heartbeat paused, like the world itself shut down to process what she'd just said. I felt the room spin, the walls shift, the air thicken. His what? My voice cracked. His mother? She nodded slowly, painfully. Yes, I am the woman who gave birth to him. Everything inside me froze, like my thoughts were suspended in ice, unable to move. No, I whispered. No, that can't. He told me. He always said he had no reason to look back at his past. He said his parents were wonderful people, that he had a normal childhood. Her eyes filled with a sorrow I've never seen in anyone before. He didn't lie. They were wonderful. They raised him with love. That's why he still protects them. And that's why he doesn't want you to know who I am. My stomach twisted, not because she was saying something unbelievable, but because she said it with a conviction that left no room for doubt. I sank slowly into the sofa, the envelope of cash still heavy in my lap, as if it represented the weight of the life I never knew my husband had. I lost him, she whispered, before I ever had a chance to hold him long enough. I swallowed hard. My voice was thick. Please, start from the beginning. She took a deep, trembling breath, and for the first time since she stepped inside, she didn't look scared, just heartbreakingly tired. The hospital switch. It was chaos that night. The storm knocked out the power in half the city. 2 babies were born within minutes of each other, mine and another couple's. She looked down at her hands, wringing the fabric of her sari as if she could squeeze the memories out. I was young, too young, too unprepared. I wasn't married. My family had thrown me out. I went to the public hospital alone. Her voice shook, but she continued. Another woman was in labor beside me, the wife of a respected, wealthy businessman. She was weak, sick. The nurses kept running between our beds. She paused, eyes distant. When the lights flickered and came back, the babies were mixed, switched. Tears slipped down her cheeks. But no one knew. Not that night, not for years. My breath caught. A hospital switch. Drama. It sounded like something that happened in a movie, not real life, not my life. What happened to your real child? I whispered. She shut her eyes. He died. A fever. He was frail, the doctor told me. His chances were low. Her voice cracked open. But I didn't know he wasn't mine until it was too late. My hand flew to my mouth. And my husband? I asked. He went home with the other couple, with a family who could give him everything I couldn't. Her grief was heavy, but what struck me hardest was how quietly she carried it, like a weight she had grown used to holding. But you said you found him, I whispered, already feeling the dread of what that must have cost him. Yes, she said, wiping her face. I searched for him for 28 years. I worked as a seamstress, saved every extra caca, asked questions, followed rumors. She laughed bitterly. Imagine, a poor woman trying to find a child who grew up in a wealthy home. Nobody takes you seriously. I felt a pressure in my chest. Empathy? Fear? Confusion? I couldn't tell. Then one day, she continued, I saw him at a college event. His face, his eyes. My God, he looked exactly like his father. Did you approach him? I asked. She shook her head. No, I panicked. I left. I didn't want to ruin his life. A long silence followed, the kind that pins your heart to your ribs. But he found me, she said softly. Years later, he saw me outside the hospital archives, asking questions. He recognized me from that college incident. My throat tightened. How did he react? The old woman sighed, a painful, slow exhale. He cried, she whispered. He cried like a child, but he begged me not to contact him again. I felt that sentence like a stab. Why? Because he didn't want to betray the parents who raised him. He didn't want to break their hearts. He said he couldn't give me a place in his life, but he could give me money, help me live comfortably. My chest constricted. This wasn't cheating money. It wasn't corruption. It was guilt money. Survivor's guilt. Identity guilt. And he sent this secretly? I asked, touching the envelope. Yes, she nodded. Without telling you, without telling anyone. That's why I came today. Her voice broke again. I don't want it anymore. I can't take money from my son while pretending I don't know the pain in his eyes. The old woman leaned back, exhausted. Then she said something that chilled me. I didn't just see my son in him, Beta. I saw myself in how he loves you. I blinked. What do you mean? He watches you the same way I once watched the man I loved, with hope and fear and longing, but also shame. So much shame. Something inside me cracked. All these years, my husband wasn't distant out of disinterest. He was drowning, quietly, alone, carrying something too heavy for any person, and he never told me. Not because he didn't trust me, but because he didn't know how to stop protecting everyone at once. The walls suddenly felt closer, the room smaller, my life narrower than I had ever realized. "How long has he known?" I whispered. "Over 10 years," she said. "He carries the secret in every breath he takes." My hands shook, not out of anger, but something deeper, something raw. I whispered the only question left inside me. "Why? Why come today?" She looked into my eyes with a determination that was both fierce and heartbreaking. "Because he is breaking, and if you don't help him, he will lose himself." My heart dropped. "And I can't lose him again." The front door handle turned. My husband was back. And I wasn't ready for what came next. The moment the door clicked shut behind my husband's return, the old woman stiffened, but she didn't stop speaking. If anything, her voice grew steadier, like she had been holding these words inside for years, and tonight was her last chance to release them. I stayed seated, clutching the envelope like it was the only thing tethering me to gravity. My husband was in the hallway, shuffling through grocery bags, humming faintly, completely unaware that his entire past was unraveling in our living room. The old woman's eyes stayed on me. "You need to understand why he does this," she whispered. "Why he sends money he can't afford. Why he hides the truth even when it is eating him alive." I nodded weakly, though my lungs felt tight. She placed a trembling hand over her heart. "He believes he stole something from me." I flinched. "He didn't steal anything. He was a baby." She gave a sad, knowing smile. "Guilt doesn't need logic, Beta. It only needs a wound." I swallowed hard. "She says I should have been the mother raising him, that I should have lived the life his adoptive mother lived, in a clean home, with dignity, with food. He thinks I deserved that." Her voice cracked. "And so he tries to give it to me now, piece by piece." I felt tears sting my eyes, not because of her words, but because I was finally understanding the heaviness in my husband's eyes, the way he paused before opening the fridge, as if ashamed of his own comfort, the way he was overly grateful for every meal I cooked, like he didn't deserve it. He hadn't been avoiding me. He was avoiding himself. Her next words were like an arrow through my chest. "The first time he saw the hospital records, he cried, not because he was angry, but because he thought he took someone else's place." I gasped. My husband, the strongest person I knew, crying alone in some dusty archive room, believing he was living a life meant for another child? My heart shattered. He kept saying, "She lost everything because of me." Her voice wavered but continued. He said he had the life her son was supposed to have. I felt the breath leave my body. "He wasn't responsible," I whispered, shaking. She nodded. "But guilt grows in silence." And he chose silence. The old woman's gaze drifted toward the door, as if remembering all the times he'd stood outside her small, crumbling apartment building. "He started visiting me after dark," she said softly, "always wearing a cap, looking over his shoulder like he was ashamed to be seen with me. But he wasn't. He was ashamed that he hadn't found me sooner." I could picture it. My husband slipping away on weekends when I thought he was working late, bringing groceries to a woman he barely knew but somehow felt more connected to than anyone else. He would bring food, pay my medical bills, repair broken things in my home. She smiled faintly. He even tried to paint my walls once, made a terrible mess. A tiny laugh escaped her, but it was soaked in sadness. He kept saying, "You shouldn't live like this, not because of me." My throat tightened again. Everything I ever misunderstood, every moment he seemed distracted, distant, or preoccupied. It wasn't me. It was this. This impossible balance between two mothers, two histories, two lives.
"He doesn't give me money because I ask," she clarified. "I refused, many times." She gestured to the returned envelope. "I told him I was content. I told him he owed me nothing, but he insisted." "Why?" I breathed. Her answer was immediate. "Because he thinks that suffering in silence is the price he must pay for being switched at birth." I felt something inside me break open. How long had he been carrying this? How many nights had he lain awake beside me, staring at the ceiling, drowning in guilt I never saw? He sees every taka he earns as stolen opportunity, every comfort in his life as something I should have had. Her fingers tightened around her sari. No matter how many times I told him it wasn't his fault, he wouldn't believe me. I thought of all his side jobs, his exhaustion, the way he sometimes refused things I bought for us. It all made sense now, but it hurt more than I could explain. Her voice softened. "He is a grown man, but when he comes to me, he becomes the frightened boy he once imagined himself to be." I closed my eyes, fighting the tears. "I begged him," she said. "I said, 'Don't come anymore. Don't give me anything. Let me live my life. Please don't split yourself in two.'" I opened my eyes. "And he didn't listen?" "No," she said, "because he carries his guilt like armor. He thinks if he stops helping me, he is abandoning me. Again." I felt my heart twist painfully. "He loves you," she said firmly, her voice suddenly gentle. "But his guilt makes him think he is unworthy of the life you built together." Her words hit me so hard, I had to look away. He wasn't distant because he didn't care. He was distant because he cared too much, because love felt like betrayal to the mother he never got to know. And suddenly, I wasn't just heartbroken for myself, I was heartbroken for him. Tears rolled down my face now, not from anger, not from fear, but from overwhelming grief. I whispered, "He carried all of this alone?" She nodded slowly, a soft sigh escaping her. "He didn't want to burden you. He thought if you knew the truth, you'd look at him differently." I looked at the front door, the shadow of his shape moving just behind it, unaware that the world he had carefully stitched together was moments away from unraveling. The old woman reached out and gently touched my hand. "Beta," she whispered, "if you want to save your marriage, you must save him first." I inhaled shakily. "Because guilt is a prison, and he locked himself inside long before you came into his life." Just then, his footsteps approached the living room. My heart pounded. The cell door he built for himself was about to be forced open. If my heart had cracks before, her next words shattered whatever pieces were left holding me together. The old woman leaned toward me, lowering her voice, not out of secrecy, but out of sorrow. "Beta, there is something you must know before he walks into this room." She swallowed hard.
He isn't distant because he doesn't love you. My breath stopped. He's distant because he thinks he doesn't deserve you. Her voice carried the weight of a verdict. Not cruel, not dramatic, just devastatingly true. I felt the air leave my lungs so suddenly I nearly choked. "What?" My whisper trembled. No, that can't be true. He would never." She closed her eyes. "He thinks leaving you will free you." My stomach twisted so sharply I felt nauseous. "He told me," she said gently, "that he's preparing to move out quietly, without telling you why, without making you watch him fall apart." I shook my head violently. No. My husband, the man who still tucked the blanket around my shoulders when he thought I was asleep. The man who whispered, "I'm sorry," into my hair when he came home late, even if he didn't explain. The man who kissed me every morning, even on days he seemed miles away. He was planning to leave? He said, "You deserve someone untouched by shame, someone whole." I felt a sharp sting behind my ribs, like a knife being pushed deeper the more she spoke. I stared into nothing, my thoughts spinning out of my control. Late nights, secret calls, hidden bank withdrawals, emotional distance, mysterious tension in his shoulders, his quiet sighs at night, the way he apologized for things that didn't need apologies. I thought he was tired of the marriage, or hiding something, or drifting. But none of it was betrayal. It was self-punishment. The punishment of a man who believed he was built on a mistake. "He loves you," she repeated softly, "but he thinks that loving you makes him unworthy, that keeping you close is selfish, that giving you a man like him is another theft." I clutched my chest. It hurt to breathe. "He's wrong," I whispered. "He's so wrong." She nodded. "Yes, but guilt does not listen to reason." A sudden memory hit me with the force of a wave. Last week, I found an extra key missing from the key holder. He said he gave it to a repairman. I didn't question it. 2 nights ago, he came home late and stuffed something into his drawer quickly before greeting me. Yesterday, he lingered at the door before leaving for work, as if memorizing how the home looked. I felt dizzy. "He wasn't preparing to leave you," she clarified, reading my panic on my face. "He was preparing to leave so he would not break you." My skin went cold. "He told me," she continued, voice trembling, "I don't want her to watch me fall apart. She deserves a man who isn't drowning before her eyes." I pressed a shaking hand against my mouth. Tears blurred my vision until the room became a smear of light and shapes. I had been living beside a quiet storm I never saw coming. The old woman spoke again, gently but firmly, the way a mother warns without scolding. "For 10 years he has lived 2 lives, one with you, full of love, one with me, full of guilt." She sighed. "And guilt eventually becomes too heavy for one heart." I could feel my pulse in my throat. "He believes," she continued, "that every happiness he has is undeserved, that he stole someone else's destiny. And he thinks the kindest thing he can do is disappear before he hurts you." I clenched my fists. "Disappear?" My voice cracked. "Is that what he told you? That leaving me is kindness?" Her expression was heartbreak itself. "Yes." The old woman leaned closer, gripping my hand with surprising strength. "Listen to me," she said urgently. "He is not trying to escape you. He is trying to protect you from himself." I shook my head. "But I don't need protection. I need truth." She smiled sadly. And he is terrified of giving it to you. My voice turned into a whisper. Why didn't he tell me? Why hide something this enormous? Her eyes softened. Because he believes his past will stain your future. My breath hitched. And because he knows, she added, that once he tells you, he cannot take it back. You will see him differently, even if you still love him. I touched my chest, right where the pain was pulsing hardest. But I don't see him differently. I see him broken. The old woman nodded. And you are the only one who can reach him. I looked at the doorway, at the faint shadow of my husband shifting as he took off his shoes, humming absently, unaware of the storm waiting in the living room. My life tilted. He wasn't the man I thought was pulling away. He was a man preparing to disappear to protect me from a truth he couldn't carry. The truth wasn't that he didn't love me. The truth was that he loved me too much. I felt something fierce and fragile rise within me. Love, fear, anger, grief, all tangled together. And one thought echoed louder than everything else. I'm going to lose him if I don't stop him. I wiped my tears, straightened my back, held the envelope firmly, because the next moment, when he walked into this room and saw us together, would determine the rest of our lives.
I heard the soft click of the front door handle before anything else, a familiar sound, and yet tonight it carried the weight of inevitability. Daniel was home. I could hear his footsteps in the hallway, slow and measured, the kind he takes when he's carrying exhaustion in every muscle of his body. He hummed under his breath, a tune I knew well, the one he always hums when he thinks I'm not listening. I gripped the envelope tighter, though I didn't even know why. Maybe to remind myself that the world I thought I knew was already gone. Then he stepped into the living room and froze. His eyes darted from me to the old woman sitting on the edge of the sofa, frail and trembling, yet somehow fierce in her quiet presence. For the first time in the 10 years I've known him, Daniel looked like a child caught between two truths, the life he has and the life he carries inside him. His face went pale. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. I could see it all at once, the guilt, the fear, the disbelief. He looked at the old woman as though seeing a ghost, or perhaps the ghost of his own past he had been trying to outrun. "Danny," she whispered softly, using the name he hadn't been called in decades. That single word made something inside him crack. I watched his shoulders slump, as if the weight of every secret he'd ever carried had been dropped on them at once. The room was suffocating, the air thick, almost tangible, heavy with unspoken truths. I wanted to reach out, to say something, anything. But I didn't know where to start. Finally, I found my voice, though it wasn't the sharp, questioning tone of anger I thought I would use. It was soft, brittle with heartbreak. "I wonder why you didn't tell me," I asked. He swallowed, eyes flicking between me and the old woman. I thought I was protecting you," he whispered, voice barely audible. I shook my head slowly. "You weren't protecting me," I said, my voice trembling. "You were protecting yourself. And now I feel like I've been living beside a stranger all these years." His hands twitched at his sides, like he wanted to reach for me but couldn't.
I could see the panic in his eyes, not from being caught, but from realizing he had been exposed to the one person he trusted most. The old woman's lips pressed together. She didn't speak. She let him struggle in silence, her gaze steady and patient. I swallowed my own tears and continued, my voice breaking. All those late nights, the secret calls, the money you sent. I thought you were hiding from me, hiding your life. But it wasn't that. It was this. Your guilt. Your shame.
Daniel's chest rose and fell rapidly. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. I didn't want to ruin what we have, he finally whispered, voice raw. I thought if you knew, you'd leave me, or hate me, or... He trailed off, and the room fell into a quiet that was heavier than any words. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him. But instead, I just sat there, letting the heartbreak settle in my chest, sinking me into the floor, into the sofa, into this room that suddenly felt smaller and colder than it ever had. You carried this alone. All these years, you carried it alone, and I didn't even know. And now I'm supposed to know that everything I thought was wrong wasn't wrong at all. It was you punishing yourself, and all I ever wanted was you. I saw his eyes glisten with unshed tears, and finally, the walls he built around himself began to crack. He took a step toward me, hesitant, unsure like a man testing the ground beneath his feet after falling into a storm. I didn't know how to, he started. I didn't know how to make it right without hurting you. I shook my head. You don't need to fix it, I said softly. I just need you to let me in, to let me be here for all of it, for you. He froze again, overwhelmed by the words, by the presence of the old woman who had lived through his guilt, and by the wife who was finally speaking her truth. The old woman looked between us, a faint, sad smile on her lips. She nodded slightly, as if passing the mantle to me. I realized in that moment that the rest of our lives, all the unspoken truths, the hidden pain, the guilt, the secrets, would either destroy us or bring us closer than ever before. And I knew, with every fragile piece of my heart, that I was ready to choose the latter. Daniel took another step toward me. His hands shook, his eyes filled, and for the first time in years, he didn't look away.
Daniel's hands were shaking as he stepped fully into the room. His gaze was fixed on the floor, then darted quickly to the old woman, and finally, slowly, back to me. For a moment, he didn't speak, just stood there, the weight of years pressing down on his shoulders. I could see it in the tension in his jaw, the quiver in his lips, the way he flexed his fingers as if trying to hold himself together. And then, finally, he spoke. I found out 3 years into our marriage. His voice was raw, trembling, like he had been swallowing it for a decade. I blinked, trying to understand. 3 years? I whispered. You've known all this time? He nodded, a single pained nod. I didn't know how to tell you, he said, voice barely audible. I felt borrowed, temporary, wrong. Every word landed like a stone in my chest. Borrowed? I echoed, my own voice shaking. Yes, he said, finally meeting my eyes. And when he did, I saw it all. The shame, the guilt, the heartbreak he had carried alone. I've been living someone else's life. And I thought if you knew, you'd see me the same way, as someone who doesn't belong, as someone stolen, as someone wrong. I reached out, but my hands trembled. Not in anger, not in accusation, but in heartbreak so deep it made my chest ache. "Danny," I whispered, "you've been punishing yourself." He flinched at the nickname, the one only his birth mother or someone deeply familiar would dare to call him. "I have," he admitted, voice breaking. "Every night, every moment, every happiness I felt, I thought I didn't deserve it, that it belonged to someone else, that she should have had it instead of me." My throat constricted. I realized I had misunderstood every single late night, every secretive call, every hidden transaction in the bank. I had assumed he was hiding something from me. I had assumed betrayal. But it wasn't betrayal. It was self-punishment. "I've been trying," he continued, swallowing hard. "I've been trying to give her the life I stole, the life she should have had. That's why the money, the visits, everything." I shook my head, tears spilling freely now. "You didn't need to do that alone. You didn't need to punish yourself for someone else's fate." He laughed softly, bitterly, the sound jagged and broken. "It doesn't work that way. Guilt doesn't listen to reason. Every time I see you happy, I feel it again, that I'm not supposed to be here, that I've taken something from someone else, and I can't stand the thought of losing you, of being unworthy of you. So I hide it. I run from it. I try to make it right in the only way I know how." I swallowed, fighting the lump in my throat. I wanted to hold him. I wanted to tell him that everything was okay, that it was all okay. But he wasn't finished.
"I wake up in the middle of the night sometimes," he admitted, voice shaking like a fragile thread. "And I think, maybe if I leave, maybe if I disappear, you'd be better off. Someone who hasn't been built from borrowed moments. Someone who isn't burdened by my shame and my mistakes." He stopped. I could see the internal battle waging inside him. The man I married, the man I loved, trapped under years of guilt he had carried alone. "I've been living two lives," he confessed. "One with you, one for her. And I can't let you see the side of me that is broken, the side that believes it's stolen happiness, the side that thinks everything I am, everything I've had belongs to someone else." I reached for his hand, finally, and he flinched, then allowed my fingers to slip between his. "Daniel," I whispered, "you don't have to bear it alone. Not anymore." He shook his head, tears running down his face. "You don't understand. I can't take it back. I can't undo the life I've lived, and I can't undo the guilt I carried since the moment I realized the truth. Every decision, every smile, every comfort I've taken, I feel like I'm stealing it." I pressed my palm to his cheek, forcing him to look at me. "Look at me," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "I'm here. I've been with you through all of it. I don't see stolen happiness. I see the man I love. That's all that matters to me." He let out a trembling laugh, half disbelief, half despair. You don't know what it's like to live in your own body and feel like you're constantly borrowing life, that every day you wake up and the world is a gift someone else should have gotten."
I've tried to make it right, tried to repay her, silently, secretly, and now after everything, I feel like I can't even stand to face you because I'm wrong, always wrong. I shook my head again, tears blurring my vision. You're not wrong. You're human. You loved the only way you knew how. He swallowed, his chest heaving, and then the words came, quiet, almost like a confession to a confessional booth. I've been trying to give her the life I stole before I disappear from yours. Silence fell. I felt the weight of every hidden tear, every secret visit, every sacrifice he had made crushed down onto my chest. And I realized in that moment that the man I had accused of distance, of coldness, of distraction, had been living in a prison of his own making, a prison built from guilt, a prison built from love, a prison built from the unbearable burden of being born into a life that was never supposed to be his, and trying to protect everyone around him, even at the cost of his own happiness. I couldn't speak at first. I could only cry. My tears ran freely, hot and relentless for the man in front of me, the man I loved, the man who had carried the weight of decades in silence. Finally, I whispered, "You don't have to disappear. Not from me. Not ever." He blinked at me, the dam finally breaking. His shoulders slumped and he let himself collapse into my arms. And I held him. For the man who loved too much. For the man who punished himself too long. For the man who finally began to break free.
I felt his weight against me, the way he trembled as though the world had finally crumbled and he had nowhere left to stand, except for me. My arms wrapped around him, and I realized how long I had waited for this moment, how long I had longed to tell him what he had never let himself hear. "Daniel," I whispered, my voice breaking, "listen to me. Really listen." He lifted his head slightly, eyes wide, brimming with tears. I could see the years of guilt carved into his face, the shadow of every secret he had carried alone. He waited for me to continue, like a boy expecting a scolding, not a truth that might finally set him free. "You didn't steal anything," I said, letting the words pour out of me, raw and urgent. "You were a child, a baby, a life switched in a hospital, yes, but that was never your fault. Never. You couldn't have known. You didn't take anything from anyone. You couldn't." I paused, letting it sink in. I traced his jawline with trembling fingers. "You've carried this guilt like a storm inside you for years. You've punished yourself in ways I could barely understand. And yet, here you are, still standing, still loving, still trying. And I want you to hear me, because you need to believe it. You are not stolen. You are not borrowed. You are whole, and you are mine." His lips quivered, but he didn't speak. His eyes searched mine, desperate for confirmation, for permission to let go of the torment he had held for so long. I continued, my voice rising with the force of everything I had bottled up. "I love you, Daniel, all of you. The man who is mine, the man who fears he doesn't deserve me, the man who hid in silence because he thought protecting me meant disappearing. That is the man I chose, the man I will always choose. You are my home. You are my life, and I will never let you leave because of something you didn't even do." He shook, silent now, letting the truth wash over him, trying to believe it even as it terrified him. His lips pressed against my temple, a soundless plea for absolution. I could feel the tension slowly unraveling from his shoulders, the rigidity in his spine giving way to something softer, more vulnerable. Then I felt her, the old woman, his mother, her hands trembling as she lifted to meet my gaze. She had been quiet, watching us, giving him space, and now her shoulders heaved with sobs she could no longer contain. "I'm so sorry,"
she whispered, voice breaking, tears streaming down her frail cheeks. I'm sorry I let you carry it all alone. I didn't know how to reach you, and I thought you were protecting me, but you were only protecting yourself, and I should have been there. I should have said something sooner. Please forgive me, my son. Please forgive me for letting you suffer. He froze, shaking, his face a mixture of disbelief and relief, like he had been waiting for permission to breathe. Mom, he choked out, voice thick. I I never wanted you to. I didn't know how to. I tightened my hold on him, letting the two of them look at each other through the haze of years of separation and pain. And then I spoke again, my voice carrying the warmth I wanted them both to feel. You see, none of this was your fault. Not yours, not his, none of it. And you, all of you, are still here. All of you are still together, and that is what matters. Daniel, look at her. Look at me. Look at the truth. You are loved. You are not alone. You never were. The old woman sobbed harder, and he buried his face into my shoulder, shaking with the force of emotions he had held back for too long. His hands gripped mine, clinging like a lifeline. I don't know if I can, he whispered. Yes, you can, I said firmly, brushing tears from his face. You can let it go. You can let us in. We are here, all of us. You are allowed to love. You are allowed to be free. You are allowed to just be Daniel, not Danny the guilty, not Danny the borrowed, not Danny the mistake. Just Daniel, my Daniel. I felt the old woman move closer, wrapping her frail arms around him. His body stiffened for a moment, but then he melted into her embrace, shaking with relief, shaking with grief, shaking with the sheer release of decades of burden. I joined them, placing a hand on both of them, a fragile triangle of love, forgiveness, and understanding. The room was silent, except for the sounds of sobs, muffled and raw, of laughter breaking through tears in a way only true release can do. You are free now, I whispered. All of you. We are together. Nothing else matters. And in that moment, the weight of years collapsed into the floor around us, leaving only the three of us, a family fractured by fate but held together by love, truth, and forgiveness. He looked up finally, eyes wet but shining with something new. Relief, love, belief. I'm home, he whispered. You've always been home, I said, pressing my forehead to his. And for the first time in a long time, the three of us sat there together, unbroken, holding the pieces of our past and beginning quietly, but resolutely, to heal.
That night, sitting on the living room floor between the two people who had shaped my husband's life in ways he never asked for, I realized something. The truth didn't destroy us. It revealed us. It stripped away every lie, every fear, every quiet punishment he had inflicted on himself. What remained was fragile, but real, and real is something you can rebuild. I took his hands again, warm, trembling, but no longer pulling away from me. Daniel, I said softly, you don't have to stand alone anymore. You don't have to choose between us. We're not pulling you apart. We're here to hold what you've been trying to carry by yourself. He swallowed hard, tears still clinging to his lashes. I don't know how to live without the guilt. It's been there so long, I don't know who I am without it. You'll learn, I whispered, and we'll learn with you. The past may have been stolen, but your future isn't. Not anymore. His mother, his real mother, reached out with a trembling hand, resting it over his. Her voice was gentle, but the years of longing made it strong. You don't owe me anything, Danny, she said. Not money, not secrecy, not pieces of your life. I never wanted any of that. I only wanted to know you were loved and safe. He looked at her, truly looked, and something shifted in his face, a softening, a release, a recognition of a bond he had been too afraid to claim. "You thought giving you money was the only way I could make things right?" he murmured, voice breaking. "No," she said, squeezing his hand. "The only way to make things right is to live the life you were given, fully, without fear. That is my blessing, not the money. You." Her words seemed to wash through him, pulling tears to the surface again, but they were different this time. Not tears of guilt, tears of relief. I leaned my head gently on his shoulder. "We choose each other, Daniel. Today, tomorrow. As long as we breathe, that is our family. Not a broken story, but a chosen one." He closed his eyes and exhaled the deepest, rawest breath I'd ever heard from him, like his lungs had finally been given permission to exist without the weight dragging them down. And in that quiet moment, I saw it, the shift in him. The years of punishing himself, of believing he was unworthy, began to loosen their grip. He wasn't free yet, but he was opening the door to freedom, and that was enough. His mother, his real mother, stood slowly, her knees shaky, and placed a hand on the back of his head the way mothers do when they're memorizing their children. "Live your life, my son. Love your wife. Let yourself be happy. That is all I want before I leave this world." He nodded, then rose to gently hug her. It wasn't a long embrace, but it was full of beginnings, full of release, full of everything he had denied himself. When she left, the house felt lighter, as if someone finally opened every window after years of stale air. Daniel stood silently in the doorway, watching her walk away, then turned to me with eyes that were no longer hiding. "I want to come home," he whispered. "You already are," I said, and as I wrapped my arms around him, feeling the way his body seemed to settle, finally, into the shape of peace, one truth echoed through me like a promise. For the first time, I saw my husband without the weight of a stolen past, and I saw the future we could finally build. It's strange how a life can begin again without warning, how the days that follow a breaking point can feel gentler, slower, almost sacred. Weeks have passed since that night, and sometimes when I wake up before Daniel, I just watch him breathe. His face is softer now. His jaw isn't locked. His shoulders don't rise defensively with every inhale. There are no more clenched fists under the blanket, no more sleepless nights pretending to be fine. Healing isn't glamorous. It isn't dramatic or loud, but it is precious. And it began quietly, with honesty. Therapy became part of our routine. The first session was hard. Daniel sat stiffly on the couch, his hands gripping each other as though he were preparing for a confession. But our therapist didn't ask him to explain everything at once. She simply said, "Let's start with the weight you've been carrying." I think that was the first time he realized he didn't have to carry it alone. Some sessions were shared. Some were his alone. Some were mine. We learned new words: guilt trauma, identity dissonance, emotional self-forgiveness. He learned to untangle the knots of his past. I learned how to support without absorbing his pain. We learned to speak without fear, to listen without judgment, to pause when the old patterns tried to creep in. Trust wasn't broken between us. It just had bruises, and bruises heal when treated gently. Integrating her, his mother, into our life took time. At first, her visits were short and hesitant. She always arrived with something homemade: bread, soup, sometimes just warm tea.
I could tell she never wanted to overstep. She was grateful for every minute she got with him, and even more grateful for the space I made for her. But it wasn't only gratitude. It was relief. A relief so deep it softened every line on her aging face. Daniel took longer. He wanted to trust the new bond, but years of emotional distance had taught him not to attach quickly. One day, after she left, he said quietly, "I don't know how to be a son. Not to her. Not after everything." I took his hand and replied, "You don't have to know. Just be yourself. That's enough." He nodded, and I knew he believed me. And little by little, the space between them closed. She became part of birthdays, part of weekend coffee, part of the small, ordinary moments that make a family real. Not perfect, but present. And presence mattered more than anything else.
Our marriage changed too. Deeper, steadier. We stopped walking on eggshells. We stopped interpreting silence as rejection. We leaned into each other with a softness we had forgotten we could have. Every night before bed, I asked him, "You okay?" And he always answered honestly, even when the answer was, "Not fully, but I'm getting there." I learned to appreciate that answer. Healing doesn't have to be complete to be beautiful. We also started a new habit, one I didn't expect to matter as much as it did. After dinner, we sit on the couch with the lights dimmed, legs tangled, talking about any small thing that crosses our minds. No secrets, no hiding, just breath and warmth and presence. Some nights he rests his head on my lap, his voice soft as he talks about memories he once buried. Other nights, he listens to me talk about my fears, my dreams, the things I learned about myself through all of this. We grew in parallel, not away from each other, toward each other. And then came the moment I'll never forget. It was late, one of those quiet nights when the world outside feels slowed down. The windows were open, letting in a gentle breeze. I was folding laundry, and Daniel was watching me the way he does sometimes, like he's memorizing the ordinary. He walked over, took the shirt from my hands, and placed it gently on the bed. His eyes were warm, still fragile in places, but clear. Clear in a way I hadn't seen since the early years of our marriage. He took my hands in his, thumb brushing my knuckles, and then he said the words that melted something deep inside me. "You didn't save me." I froze for a second, not because the words hurt, but because I knew a truth was coming. He cupped my face with both hands, pulling me closer. "You didn't save me," he repeated softly. "You showed me that I was never broken." My throat tightened, my vision blurred. Because that was everything. Everything he had needed to believe, everything I had hoped he would see in himself. I whispered, "You were never broken, Daniel. Just lost." He murmured, "I'm found because you stayed." My heart cracked open in the best possible way. I whispered back, "I didn't stay. I chose you. Every day I choose you." He kissed me, slowly, deeply, with a tenderness that made time feel irrelevant. It wasn't a kiss of passion or desperation. It was a kiss of recognition, a kiss of home. And the darkness didn't vanish, but it no longer owned us. We were scarred, yes. Shaken, yes. Changed, undeniably, but not broken. Never broken. We came out the other side bruised but breathing, tested but unshaken, wounded but woven tighter together than ever before. And as I lay beside him that night, our fingers intertwined, I felt it with every beat of my heart. We survived something deep, dark, and transformative. And now, finally, we were beginning again.